Okay. Welcome, everybody. I gave ourselves a big mission, which is to do all of this Siman in one go. Siman 110, Kuf Yud, and I want to give a little introduction. And the introduction is like this. Well, the introduction is like this: that basically there's this idea of Tarovot. That's what we're studying, Tarovot, and in Tarovot you have bittul. And we saw that you have bittul barov in general. That's the general concept, bittul barov. Then sometimes you have exceptions to bittul barov. What are some exceptions to bittul barov? Well, the number one exception, which you probably wouldn't think of as an exception to bittul barov, is tam ke'ikr. Tam ke'ikr is an exception to bittul barov. When you have tam of something, then it's not bittul barov. What are other exceptions? We have Joel. What are other exceptions?
חתיכה הראויה להתכבד, דבר שיש לו מתירין, דבר שבמניין maybe, right?
And now we're basically talking about another kind of exception, or almost a different framework to view things, and this is called kavua. That things that are, well, we're going to get. I mean, that's the second part of what we're going to talk about today. But kavua is something that is not going to have the din of bittul barov that would normally apply, because it's kavua. Whatever kavua means, it's known. And that's why it's here at the end of the section, because we're sort of dealing with all the exceptions. At the end of the section of Tarovot is the exceptions to the rule of bittul barov. Devar shebeminyan is also an exception, and that's right. And that's where we'll start. So let's start with devar beminyan, and then we'll go to we're in Torah, right? Yes, and then we'll go to we'll start with this exception of minyan, and then I really want to get quickly into the dinim of kavua. So let's just open our tour to Kuf Yud Aleph, and there's a few highlights that I selected in the Beit Yosef that I'd like to look at. Here, Ruben, you want to read just the tour for us? I know you just got here.
Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to find it, and then we'll go for it. All right, Kuf Yud Aleph.
Yeah.
You mean
Kuf Yud.
Kuf Yud, yeah.
Sorry, Kuf Yud.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
I said Kuf Yud Aleph. Sorry, I meant Kuf Yud Aleph.
All right, so ready when you are. חתיכה ראויה להתכבד, ושאר דברים החשובים כגון בעלי חיים ודברים שדרכם להימנות, שנתערבו בהיתר, אינם בטלים לעולם אפילו בלב, אפילו יבש ביבש. ופירש חי, דווקא דברים שלעולם אין מוכרים אותם אלא במניין. Let me know if you want me to translate.
So just that last part you should translate. It's so the Re says dafka things that
we're not selling by number.
We never sell by, right? She'ein darka she'ein mochrim otam ela b'minyan, that we only sell them in a number. In other words, something that's only sold by number. Let's say, well, I don't know. How about this example? Bottles of wine. You never sell bottles of wine by a basket of bottles of wine. I'm specifically saying, but I was thinking about this because the
before Purim maybe. Before Purim maybe.
In other words, if you talk about wine, you maybe will say, well, a barrel could be small or big or something. Maybe it's not b'minyan. But that's why I changed it to bottles of wine. Bottles of wine is something b'minyan. 6 bottles of wine, a case, whatever. Okay. So those are only sold by number. Those are not batel.
שלעולם הם מוכרים אותם אלא במניין, דהלכה כרבי יוחנן, דאמר עת שדרכו להימנות שנינו, פירוש שלעולם אין מורחים אותם אלא במניין. אבל דברים שלפעמים מורחים אותם בעומד, בטל ברוב. So things that we sell sometimes by weight, then in this case, they're batal berov.
Well, Omed, what does Omed mean? Translate Omed.
My translation is you sell them by weight.
Any other
But it's-
translations?
More literally like a measurement. So I guess maybe
Some kind of measurement, yeah.
Okay, measurement. Any other
Is-
translations?
Estimation.
Estimation,
Estimate.
right.
Estimation. That's what I would go with. Estimation. By estimate. My class, I think we discussed this, I think, before in some classes. And that's why I didn't assign the Gemaras, because we've seen these Gemaras. We talked about, I think Joel taught us, we had like Rabbi Meir, and we had all this, we had many opinions here, and it ultimately ended up with Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. But Omed in estimation. So we're distinguishing between estimation and count and counting. Estimation, my favorite example is like, because I used to go to Ohio in my youth, and they would sell, and even in Massachusetts, they'll sell corn, a bushel of corn, and you can buy a bushel of corn, and it doesn't have an actual, and it will say on it, 15 to 17 ears or something. It's not, they're not telling you, it's by estimation. It's not, they're not telling, if you can't come and say, hey, I got to the car and I saw this bushel only had 15 ears, or only had, then that's your problem. In other words, maybe those ears were bigger ears than the other ones. We're selling it not by weight and not by counting, but by estimation. Those things, that's the contrast. And I think, Rabbi Landis, go ahead.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think we should just say another word about estimation. In other words, an amount that a reasonable person could estimate. And they would always, so they're looking for a bushel, and you're always going to end up with, I forgot the number you gave, somewhere between 18 to 22. That's what a reasonable person does. And it's not that we're favoring estimation, but that's what estimation gives us.
Right. I guess what you're thinking is like, if you get to the car and you only have 12, then you'll say, wait a second, this is not a full bushel. But a full bushel, people can identify.
Yeah. Fine. That's good. Thank you.
But Joel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like maybe a question of, is each individual one important enough that I care if I'm plus or minus one, right?
Exactly. If each one, exactly, that's the point. Since each ear is important, then it's not batel. But when I'm selling the thing in a case where it's not that, where I sell by estimation, then each one is not that significant. So therefore it's not significant, so it's not, so it's batel, so it is batel. The question of things that are sold by weight, where does that go? And in that sense, I think, Ruben, you were kind of right. I think weight, I mean, in general, we're going to say that weight is similar to estimation in the sense that even though weight is very precise, right? If I'm buying hamburger meat and you can't charge me. In Israel, they had a whole thing about like, how come you're charging them for the weight of the plastic container that you're weighing it in? So now in the supermarket, they do a minus like 2 grams before they weigh your hamburger meat or whatever you're buying, because they don't want to weigh the plastic. So weight is actually not an estimation at all, but yeah,
but it is.
But it's not number. But it's certainly not number.
Right? Is it not number? And because it's an estimation, like sure, in your hamburger meat, you're always going to have the same for 14 grams. But if I want to make baked
Wait, I lost the second half of your sentence.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think you're muted.
muted. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That was actually my cat. And if I want to buy apples to make baked apples and I buy 3 pounds of apples, some places that's 3 like 5 apples, and some places it's 2, and so.
Well, that's the question. Apples are sold by weight, but are they davar shebaminion? In other words, you could count apples.
You also,
but they're not sold that way.
Yes, they
except
are.
on the street of New York.
Well, I would say at Trader Joe's as well.
Well, that's the question. That's exactly the question. Things that are sold sometimes not by number and sometimes not. I'm just saying that weight, in my opinion, is a kind of fuzzy area, even though it's universally accepted as being not count. But if you notice that he uses the word omed, it's certainly also not estimation. So I think it's a kind of fuzzy area. But halakhically, just so I don't want to confuse everybody, halakhically, we're going to consider things that are sold by weight and as being not devar shebeminyan. So, right, whereas eggs are not sold by weight, eggs are sold by count. You get a dozen eggs and there's only 10 eggs there, you're cheated. They're not sold by weight, they're sold by count. So those are devarim shebeminyan, and pretty much always sold in minyan nowadays. Okay.
It also makes sense because things by weight, it's harder, right? If the point is like that we have this thing that is very important to us, like the chaticha ro'eh litkabed, then if it's a similar sort of category, then it's harder to imagine that as a thing that's like measured by weight.
Right.
Where is the particular thing that we care about so much?
Wait,
That
so
it
what
wouldn't be
you're
batel.
saying?
That it wouldn't be batel.
I don't understand which side you're coming out of.
I'm getting out on the side that the things by weight should not count as devar shebeminyan, which is what you said.
Right.
Because about devar shebeminyan is not just that we don't estimate it, rather it's like each and every item, like it's the item.
Right.
There's the discrete item has an importance as opposed to like
Except
a substance.
if you're thinking about like sesame seeds, then you're right. Like if you sell sesame seeds by weight, so then like each item is not that important. But you could be thinking about like apples or pomegranates, where each one is significant, but they're sold by weight. But each one is significant.
Also, we saw, I think in Sugiyat Chaticha Ro'eh Litkabed, but the concept here that you can, the whole concept of Chaticha Ro'eh Litkabed is that something that, I don't know, it could be with no importance on its own, but there is a level of achshave here. So I'm thinking about the question of apples or things that we sell by weight as something that is a bit less objective, meaning it in some context it can be not devar shebeminyan. In some context, like for example, I'm making baked apples, and in my house, like I need specifically 5 apples because we have 5 people. So even though we sell apples by weight, in this context of my bishul,
right? Well, that's the question. Why is mechira the time that we decide whether the number counts? Why is not preparation in the kitchen or some other time that it says?
Because it reflects a social standard. That's what mechira is, right? It's at that point of transaction, whether it's important or not. Because if you say that it becomes important afterwards, then it becomes way too subjective, and there's no way to make like a central standard for everybody.
That's a beautiful
point. But we do see
mechira is
have this
between
thing.
2 people, so it's not my personal opinion. It's what we agree on. You're a very good point.
Because
so therefore,
like
it doesn't matter that I have making a pie and I need dafka 4 apples and now I have 5 or now I have only 3. Right, because it matters at the time of mechira. Okay, very nice. I like that. That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's go on.
לכך כתב שביצה בטלה, ביצה is מבטל, שפעמים מוכרים סל מלא ביצים ביחד, שפעמים מוכרים סל מלא ביצים ביחד. ובלייתור כתב שביצה אינה בטלה. והרמב"ם פסק כחכמים, ואפילו דבר שדרכו להימנות, לעולם בטל. דשבעה דברים לבד הן, שאין בטלים, כגון רימונים בדן, ואגוזים, פרח וכו'.
All right, so this is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that it's dafka these things only, and that's how the Rambam paskins. That it's not anything that's been minyan. It's only these 7 things, and but the who did he quote before? Bala Itur. Well, he says that they're batel. He says that what's Bala Itur's opinion?
The continuation.
It's the isn't it? Who has the opposite opinion?
Yeah, but the Bala Itur says what?
He's just about eggs.
Why, presumably? Because it's not sold in a sal, presumably. Okay, and the Rambam says that it's only certain things, and therefore also an egg would be not one of those things, and therefore would be batel.
Wait, is it because it's not sold in a style or because it's not always? Because like sometimes it's the
Sometimes, exactly.
should be, yeah.
Since
Right, that-
sometimes it's sold, exactly. Since sometimes it's sold in a sal, it's batel. But no,
So
but
the-
Bella Itter holds that it's never sold in. I mean, that's what I understand.
I'm not. Well,
I
I'm not
think they're
sure.
arguing-
It could be a
could be
deeper
they're arguing
machloket. It
in
could be a
din.
machloket of whether, yeah,
It
right.
could be in who we paskin like, Rish Lakish or Rabbi Yochanan, or it could be that they're arguing about how eggs are sold.
No, maybe he's
And-
saying that even if it's sold by the basket, it's always davar shebeminyan, right? Because you don't just fill up the basket with eggs, you fill up the basket with a certain amount of eggs.
No. When we say it's sold by a basket, what we mean is without counting. That's what we mean. That's just another way of saying without counting.
Also,
Obviously, the
Baal
eggs are
said
not
that it's-
sold. They're not. We don't throw them in the air and say catch. We obviously put them in a basket. But the question is, do we count them or do we sell them by the basket? Like my example of corn. You see what I'm saying? That's
Right.
okay. So anyway, the Rambam says it's only these 6 things, which is kind of unusual. Why is he poskening like Rabbi Akiva? Although whatever, we can get into the klalim of halacha, but actually there is reason to say you should posken like Rabbi Akiva. Anyway, mihu.
ומי הוא כתב? כל דבר שהוא חשוב אצל בני מקום מן המקומות, לפי הזמן ולפני המקום, שהוא שם אינו בטל ואוסר כלשהו.
Oh, so
Basically,
the
this
Rambam
adds-
adds that it's not just these 6 things. It's anything like these 6 things. So while he's poskening like Rabbi Akiva, he's expanding the list to anything in that time that is a significant thing, as significant as these things used to be.
Right, so the 6 things are like a standard, but if you have something that's like those 6 things that are considered important, it's really subjective depending on the time and the place.
Exactly. V'harav Rabbi Yehuda.
והרב רבי יהודה הורה על קורקבן, טרפה, שנתערב באחרים, שהוא בטל. זה לא עבירה הוא להתכוון, כדאמרינן, בני מין אוכלים, לאו בריניש. ולפי זה הוא הדינמי בכל בני המין.
So explain that.
Rabbi Yehuda just gave an opinion as it relates to a gizzard, non-kosher, that was mixed in with other, I guess, kosher gizzard. Shu batal, that's batal. Why? De lo avera ulit because it's not considered something that's chaulit kaved. Kedam rinan benemeis, like organs, ochlehem lav barinish. I guess organs are not edible in a way, or like people usually don't eat them.
People who eat them are not human. It's kind of a strong statement against organ meat. Okay. With the fizeh.
ולפי זה הוא הדינמי בכל בני המין. So basically, he extends the deen to every single organ.
Let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Let's jump right to the Shulchan Aruch and see how because we just now saw a bunch of different opinions. Let's see how we pass them. A second.
Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, continue in the Shulchan Aruch.
הדבר חשוב אוסר במינו בכל שהוא. והם 7 דברים ואלו הם, אגוזי פרח, ורימוני בדן, וחביות סתומות, וחלופות תרדים, וכלחי קירוב, ולידת יונית, וכיכרות של בעל הבית. וכן בעלי חיים חשובים הן, ואינם מבטלים. אבל שאר דברים, אף על פי שדרכם להימנות, הרי אלו עולים בשיעורם.
Oh. So here he's asking like who?
Seems to be asking not like the Rambam, but a bit like a bit more extreme than the Rambam, like the original statement of the Rambam, that only the 7 things are considered chashuv.
You're saying it's like the Rambam, but without the extension of everything like them.
The extension comes in. It's exactly like the Rambam.
Where does the extension comes in?
The extension comes in at the end of the sieve.
No, he says kol davar shu chashuv etzel bnei makom.
Right. So now we didn't get there yet. We didn't get there yet. So yeah, so go straight to there. So you skip the Ramah.
כל דבר שהוא חשוב אצל בני מקום מהמקומות, כגון אגוזי פרח ורימוני בדן בארץ ישראל, באותם הזמנים הוא אוסר בכל שהוא, לפי חשיבותו באותו מקום ובאותו זמן. ולא הוזכרו אלו, אלא לפי שהן עוסקים בכל שהם בכל מקום. והוא הדין בכל כיוצא בהם בשאר מקומות. Right, so
This is almost an exact quotation of the Rambam. This is almost an exact quotation of the Rambam. So he's actually passing like Rabbi Akiva, like the Rambam, and it's just these 6 things, but with the extension that they apply to anything in the time. So that would mean that anything not in the list, or that, you know, it'd be hard to know what to add. And the truth is, since this is all a din de Rabbanan, we probably wouldn't add, we would be making, we wouldn't necessarily add things to the list unless we're really sure that it's like those things. So we might not add anything. So it comes out that's the most lenient opinion, really. So now read the Ramah.
For me, it's a bit confusing to understand because even within the same place, different communities have different importance on certain things, right? So I'm saying, like, I don't know, Moroccans would think that like certain bones are more important because it makes delicious flavor in the tafina, but on the other hand, Ashkenaz won't care about it, right?
You're saying it could be in the same place. Well, right. The
The same
Rambam is
place,
writing in a time where there was much
everything was,
more
yeah.
of a locality of culture. And nowadays we live in mixed cultures. So you're right, it doesn't quite fit.
I mean, I think it makes perfect sense to say different foods are going to be considered chashuv in different cultures, right? I mean,
Right.
But I'm saying even within the same space, right, or within the same like geographical location, you have different communities that put different importance on different foods.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it's just hard, halachically speaking, to define like what's considered chashuv and what's not.
Yeah.
I
would
wonder
say-
then if makom is really about location, like the city, so much as the community, because often like the communities would be quite separate within the city, and then that could.
Well, remember, we did
Yeah,
say
that
that it
came
goes
later.
by mechira.
Yeah,
Mechira would mean that there has to be at least a shuk for it. And that means it has to be at least somewhat prevalent. It can't be that I personally, that my community of you know, just 3 people, you know, we import our stuff from somewhere else.
The mechira is dafka for the Devar Minyan thing. The mechira was not the like point that we made around the general chashivut like argument, right? The mechira was about how are things sold.
I understand. But we could learn from the mechira idea that it can't be, it has to be something that's not subjective.
Right, but the whole point of that last note in this seif and the one the Rambam makes is a form of subjectivity, right? Is like saying that it is inherently, there is a deeply subjective element to this, right?
But,
So like,
but that it's a question of what you consider makom.
I mean, like you can argue
how
that
big
one
is
of the
makom?
reasons that the Et Toli note is a more
Well,
compelling.
no, you could argue that it's culturally objective as opposed to be subjective.
Wait, let's see finish.
You could argue that why the Echdar Kalim note is more compelling to some people is that while it is not a completely subjective thing, sorry, it's not a completely objective thing, it is more objective when we are basing things off of how is this sold, right? But the whole point is that like with the chashivut in a particular makom, there isn't like, it's not about how is something sold because we're not given a metric of that, right? Like it actually is about essentially a form of subjectivity. Obviously, as you mentioned, that's difficult and would probably lead to people very rarely adding something to that list because it would be so hard to arrive at a more objective, agreed upon thing that meets those criteria. But that is part of what distinguishes this from the Echdar Kalim note Shita.
What distinguishes it?
The fact that like it is even less objective, right? That it's not about a marker
Right.
of how this is sold. We're not given a certain like particular criteria for what makes it chashuv. We say it is chashuv like this in a given time and place.
So you're saying it has nothing to do with whether we count it or not. It's just whether it's like these things.
It is whether it is chashuv for those people in the same way that like kikarot shabal habayit are. How do we determine exactly what that chashivut is? It's not laid out, at least.
I think you're making a good point. You're making a good point. You're saying it actually comes out then that it doesn't matter at all how we sell it. It matters how important it is, how important the item is. And we're not using the criterion of point of sale and the mechanism of sale to determine its importance, but rather just by comparing it to these things. That's a good point. That's a good point. I think you're right.
But aren't those intertwined with one another, depending on the importance? They'll have an effect on the mechira. Because like the more important it
They
is,
may
the
be
more
related,
the
but
more
they're
you're
not-
gonna count it, right?
But the final criterion is going to be whether it's like these things. They may be related, but then that's not the criterion is not going to be at all counting. All right, but let's go to the Ramah. Let's go to the Ramah. Read the Ramah.
אגב, יש אומרים דכל דבר שבמניין, דהיינו שדרכו להימנות, תמיד אינו בטל, וכן נוהגים. So the Rama said that everything that's at שדרכו להימנות, depend, like regardless of
No,
what it
the
is.
Rambam said this is a list.
No,
The Rambam
in
said
the
it's a
Rama.
list.
When the Rama, sorry.
The Ramah
Yeah,
says.
ויש אומרים דכל דבר שבמניין, דהיינו שדרכו להימנות. So anything that שבמניין, that's שדרכו להימנות, תמיד אינו בטל. It's never בטל.
Right.
וכן נוהגים, and that's hifzak
Oh,
halacha.
so he brings back counting. But only things that are always counted. Go ahead.
אחד הדבר חשוב אינו בטיל, אינו אלא מדרבנן, ואז לינן בספקו לכולה. The
Okay.
idea that דבר חשוב is not batal, that's only a derabanan, and since it's a derabanan, we tend to be posek lekula.
Right. So if we have a suffix, and the suffix has to be what kind of suffix? Anybody jump in here? What kind of suffix is allowed and what kind of suffix is not allowed? Aaron.
If it's a suffix about whether it's a devar chashuv, then it's lakula. But if it's definitely an isur, if it's definitely a chashuv, but suffix isur, then it's suffix dorait. Yeah, it's suffix l'chumra. Whether or not it's suffix dorait.
Exactly. If it's a suffix, if it's like a suffix treifa, but it's for sure chashuv, then it won't be bata. It's only if it's a suffix in this din derabanan, in whether it is devar chashuv. I'm just thinking I was going to do more things here, but we had such a good discussion that I don't think we were going to do the other commentaries here. I don't think. Well, actually, if you look at Yud in the Shach, it says, Im yesh bo safek im hu davar chashuv or lo. That's exactly what you just said. In other words, it has to be a safek about whether it's chashuv or lo. V'ken kasav isra. Okay. Also, in tet, he just spells in tet. The Shach just spells out aval davar shemochrim lifamim gam ken ba'omed komo beitzim shelifamim mochrim sal malei beitzim kedeite b'shas bater. Something that is sometimes sold like eggs is bater. Now, that is not universally agreed upon. If you look in Taz Aleph, towards the end of Taz Aleph, I don't know how to exactly specify the location, but about 2/3 through, it says Vaha'idna. And nowadays, Vaha'idna have a beitza davar shemochrim tamid b'minyan. He says, no. Eggs are sold always. So here you have a machloket in Metziut. But notice that the Shach quoted Shas. He says, as we find in Shas. So the Shas, in other words, that's a few hundred years, maybe over 1,000 years before the Shach. So he seems to be quoting an old source, whereas the Taz seems to be a more up to date. Yeah, Aaron.
Oh, there is also the third position stam that holds like Rish Lakish, which is the Marshal and Sefer Truma, which is
what? Tell us, please.
Kol Shadar Kolim Note.
And then it would include everything, right? Because that would be a
I think the Shach and Taz both point out that wherever you hold, now that Beitzim are sold in a particular way, you should be machmir on them. However you hold on this broader question.
In other words, I think was it Joel who sent us this letter about the derech of the Marshal, but yeah, the Marshal is bringing the minhag more machmir than the Ramah even, and saying that it's anything that you sometimes count, and then eggs would for sure be. So it comes out eggs you really are not batel. So what was that? So wait a second. So I have a question for you all. We all learned 61 eggs. Batel. Why is it batel? It's 61 eggs. Someone explain to me that halacha that we learned. The 61 eggs supposed to be batel. It shouldn't be batel. It should be Devar Mabinyan. So Aaron, go ahead.
You would have to say that that's when you take the egg out.
Exactly. That 61 is actually saying the egg has to be removed. If you can't remove the egg, you don't know which one it is, then it's all not kosher. Of course, you are going to know which one it is because it's an egg with an ifroah. It has a chicken in it. You're going to be able to see. And the only reason you think there's a problem is because you opened it and found that there was a blood spot in it or there was a chicken in it. So obviously you're removing it. So that's not such a big kiddush. But yeah, that what we learned before. So what was the 61? Was just talking about bittul tam. We were worried about the tam, and I think that it's the Rambam who says, I think that or one of the commentaries here says, Hekera asu. In other words, because it's a davar shebeminyan, and it's like not batel, even in Elef, so that's why they required 61. Remember, we talked about 61 because the eggs are different sizes. Maybe we don't know. But there's another reason. Hekera asu. They just made a chumrah so that you remember that eggs have a special din of not being batel, and that's why we need 61 and not 60.
Didn't the Rambam say that, but for Biria?
I think it's because it's a Biria and not because it's the minyan in that case.
Right, that was talking about Efroach as the Biria, but also
that's not the Efroach as the Biria. You're right. That's the Rambam Efroach. But you could say it also. But that's the case of the egg. I mean, you're saying the eggs is with a spot or a treifa egg. You're saying. But even it's the same thing. It would be the same thing.
Right, but I'm saying like a treifa egg, for example, you would get the scenario of maybe you haven't been able to remove it, right? Because with like a egg, that's because of dam or an efroach, obviously, yes, you know that this happens because you've already cracked it open and seen that and can get rid of it. But like a treifa egg would work the same as any other.
You're right, a treifa egg. So this is put this in your pipe to remember that a treifa egg that you can't find it is now going to oser all of the eggs that you boil if they're hard-boiled eggs, because is it the Varshavami? Well, that's okay. Let's go on. Balei Chaim. Here, Yavni, when you read Balei Chaim, bet.
בעלי חיים שנתערבו באחרים ונשחטו בטל חשיבותן ובטלים. והוא שנשחטו בשוגג ודווקא בעלי חיים קטנים שאינן ראויים להתכבד לאחר שחיטתן.
Okay, so explain. So
animals that got mixed in, some of them being kosher and some of them being not kosher, and then they were I'm not sure, and then they were slaughtered, then their importance is nullified, and so therefore they can be
and what if they're not slaughtered? And what if they're not slaughtered?
They're not, apparently.
Yeah, if they're not slaughtered, then animals are not batel. But if they're slaughtered, so now he says, but you can't go ahead and slaughter them. So actually, if you had like a bunch of animals and one of them was, let's say, shor haniskal, was a shor that was supposed to be killed, and you don't know which one is this shor haniskal, you can't identify it because it's no different from any other shor, and it's all with these other shvarim. They're all you can't have them. They're all have a din of shor haniskal, and as you can't use them, you can't benefit from them. They're not batel. But if by accident they got slaughtered, then it's batel chashivutan. But wait a second. What about the din of if it's slaughtered? Isn't it a haticha ruya litchabed? Remember, it's.
Well, that's part of the machloket. I mean, first of all, they mentioned this in the Torah and the Beis Yosef, right? But like there's the opinion that we saw in haticha ruya litchabed that like a whole slaughtered carcass is not a haticha ruya litchabed because it's not fit to be served as is. Right. And it seems like probably that's what the Beis Yosef, but like what the Mechaber is going off.
That contradicts. That's not what the Mechaber paskins.
Correct. It's not how he paskins part of that. He paskins like more makil than the Ramah, but still not entirely like that. But it is like he doesn't qualify it, right? Like it seems like on its face, like he's just quoting the Rashba who does paskin that way, right? Whereas the Ramah doesn't hold that way.
wait. So there are two. What you're saying that there's like a kind of a contradiction in the Mechaber, because here he seems to say that it's batel chashivatos. Let me just say what you were saying. Because once it's nishchat, it seems to have immediately be batel its chashivutan, and we wonder why. Normally, we would say, but it is a chaticha ru'i l'tchabed. So there's three possible answers why it's not a stira. So let's see what we got. Reuven, what do you say?
Well, it does say at the end that he has a caveat, right? דווקא בעלי חיים קטנים שאינם ראויים לכבד לאחר
That's the
פרידתם.
Ramah.
Exactly. So the Ramah, that's one of the three
Because
terrorists.
have it like between like in quotation
No, that's
marks.
the Ramah. Alexi is 100% right. That is the Ramah's explanation. He's saying, but I would say it's the Ramah's perush. He says dafka. He doesn't say anu noagi. He doesn't say that's our approach. He's explaining the Ramah. He's explaining the Mechaber, and he's saying, no, don't misunderstand. That's dafka when it's a very small animal. So what has it helped? That's very small. So when you slaughter it, it's not really l'tchabed. It's like a sparrow or something. So
Sorry, what makes
nobody.
you say that it's the Rama? Because like there's nothing indicating that it's the Rama saying that.
Because it's in
Rashi script.
But
first of all,
Haga beforehand,
Rashi script,
and
but
then,
no, because if you look in the Beit Yosef and you'll see that in the Darkei Moshe the Ramah brings this same explanation. The Beit Yosef in fact asks this question, and the Ramah in the Darkei Moshe actually says exactly this answer. So it is the Ramah based on what we've seen in the Darkei Moshe. First of all, secondly, it's in italics. Third, yeah. Anyway, I'm not whatever. So, but that's whatever. I give you a better answer because it's actually what he says in the Darkei Moshe. Anyway, that's one teretz, that it's very small. So when you slaughter it, it is not ru'i l'tchabed. I want two more answers. Aaron.
I mean, similar to what Lexi said, the Rishal says it has not been mufshad yet.
Exactly. It's chaser ma'aseh gadol. It's missing a big act of you slaughtered it, but you didn't yet strip it of its skin. You didn't take out the internal parts, so it's missing that. So it's not ru'i l'tchabed. But there's a third answer, the shach's answer. I believe it's the shach's answer.
You sure it's not the Taz?
Maybe it's the Taz. I'll take anybody. What is it? Who is what?
The Taz says right there when here it's even if it's like a kachush animal that's not ru'i l'achila. When it's alive, it's still because it's
right.
Kachush.
It's very thin. It's that's the Taz.
Yeah, it's the Taz.
The Taz also brings the Rashal.
Mm-hmm. And he
talks about mechusar ma'aseh gadol. The nirli de chashiva shel balei chai hu chashivut bifnei atz. Wait a minute. Kachush. Devar kachush. No, I want so that's a fourth answer. There's another. I think the Shach says. Well, I think it's that it's very small pieces. Isn't that an answer?
The Shach talks about the idea of like referencing something we saw earlier of the idea of it basically being the batel chashivut of a certain category, but still in fact having the chashivut of a different category. That basically like shkayach is batel chashivut of balei chayim, but you still have chatichai l'tkabed, or you've batel this, but it's still a davar minyan. That you could argue it's only canceling.
In other words, the Mechaber is just saying that it lost its status of being not batel because of it's an animal, but it still, of course, has its chashivut because of its being hatichad ru'i l'tchabed. It just changes categories. That's one. But there's also that's another answer. Yes, that's not what I was remembering.
I do think that actually isn't such a stira, because just going back, if I recall correctly, and I think somebody mentioned this in the chat, right? I think the Mechaber like believes that like most animals when they're immediately slaughtered are considered to be like mechusar ma'aseh gadol, right? It's like he said that like a fully plucked.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a totally great answer.
Right. It's just that like, okay, immediately after you shafted it, before any fur
and,
like things,
right?
Then it is mechusar ma'aseh gadol, and it's not chatichai.
And then it immediately, let's go further. And then it immediately becomes heter.
already buttheld, and so by the time
And then it's butt-tail, and so now if I come, exactly,
We
and
don't
now
say
if I
it's back
come
to
and
being
remove the
butt-tail.
skin, I didn't ruin anything because it was already het there. It immediately became het there. It didn't get, it was already het there as soon as I slaughtered it. And now the fact that I go and fix it up and make it into a hatikah ru'iyah letkabed doesn't make it not batel. It was already batel. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Okay. Let's go on to Gimel, and that's the Teisha Chanuyot. So let me give I want to give my introduction here a little bit though. I want to have a little discussion actually about this Teisha Chanuyot, because, and I said in the introduction was that we're seeing all kinds of things that are not allowing bittul. For example, minyan, or being in this category of 7 things, or being an animal. And then the third, and then this other category is davar she's kavua. So well, first of all, what are some of the examples in the Gemara? Can somebody tell me one of the examples in the Gemara that we've seen? I signed some Gemaras, and I don't want to read them in together, but let's discuss them outside.
Well,
There's a case of the young girl who's
Jacob and then Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, partly I remember because I had to do some of this summer. But yeah, if there's a woman that goes into a city and has sex or gets raped there, it's kavua because we know the demographics of the city.
No, right. The city is, let's say, mostly people who will not puzzle her for kahuna.
Right. But
some people who
city,
would puzzle her for kahuna.
Yeah.
And then, but since she went into the city, she went into a makom kavua, where the people are in their categories known. Therefore, what's the din?
That we would make her, or like her puzzle for kahuna. Yeah.
Out of what? Would it be a din? Would it be a din vadai?
But I'm trying to remember. I mean,
it would be a safek. It would be a safek.
Yeah.
Mexa. We would, even though we know the demographics, like you said, it would still be considered mecha. But if somebody came out of the city, then what's the rule that we would apply? Right, call the parush. Meruba parush, right. So then we would say, since most of the people in the city are not going to puzzle her for kahuna, she's not going to be puzzled for kahuna. So what is that din? That din is kind of like row, right? We go after the statistics. We go after the row. But if it's in the place, then we don't go after the statistics. Well, let's start. What is the source for this din? What's the case that's the source for this din in the Torah? This is, I would say, one of the most unobvious sources that this is a din in the Torah. Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
It's Devarim Yotet, the case of somebody who kills someone but didn't intend to kill that particular person.
Oh wait, what does the Torah say? What does the Torah say exactly?
I can just get it up 1 sec.
Yeah.
So the Torah says, "V'chi ish sonei l'rehu v'arav lo v'kam alav hikihu nefesh v'meit v'nas elachat ha'arim ha'el."
Right. So if somebody,
and it means, and the way they read it is, it has to be that ish who you hated, who you sonate.
Right. You lied in wait to kill that person that you hated, and you killed him. And then you go to this city. Then I guess,
well, then
you're not supposed to go
get
you're
sent
supposed to get
back
killed.
from the city, and you get
You're supposed to be executed in such a case. So we're talking about like first-degree murder. And the description of first-degree murder is that you intended to kill this person, you laid in wait for him, and you killed him. So what do the rabbis learn from that?
That if you didn't intend to kill that particular person, then it doesn't count as first-degree murder exactly.
Right. So what's the case that they give? Now you get to the case that you throw a rock into a group of people,
and one of them isn't Jewish.
And one of them isn't Jewish. Or let's just say, for the sake of political correctness, let's just say one of them would not cause you to have a din of mavet. And the other ones would cause you to have a din of mavet. For whatever reason. Yeah. I thought of a different example. Not that one of them is, let's say, already had a din from the Sanhedrin that he was supposed to be executed. If you kill a person who was supposed to be executed, then you didn't, it's not first-degree murder for sure. But whatever. It's a person that you would not get the din of death penalty because and you threw it into this group of 9 people who would give you that din of death penalty, or innocent people, and one person was culpable. And what would you and in that case, what do we say? We say, why don't we say go after the rove? Since most of the people were people that would cause you to get the death penalty, you should get the death penalty. And yet we say, no, view it as a case of 50-50. And therefore it's a suffix. And so a suffix, you're patur for the death penalty. And why do we say so? Why do we not say go after the rove in such a case? And we say because they're kavua. Well, so what does it mean that they're kavua? They're what does it mean? What's the definition of kavua according to that case? Is it because you threw it into them? And it's very different from the first case, the Jacob case, where she went into the town and they're in their homes or something. Here, it's not because of their location so much as their status, as their status. And what about their status? Their status is known. In other words, there's no doubt about who they are. We know exactly who each one is. In fact, if there would be a doubt about which one, the din might be different, right? If we didn't know who was culpable, who was a Gentile and who was a Jew, we didn't know that, then the din would be different. But they're all known, so the known entities. So it seems that kavua is kind of like yadua, right? It's kind of like we know what they are. What's does this make any sense? Does this make any sense? Anybody give a rationale for this? All right. Well, at least what we can say is that we don't apply the din of holchin achar rov. Now, some of the achronim say, or they say, well, wait a second. The Sanhedrin itself is kavua. The people are sitting in their place in the Sanhedrin, and we know who each one's name is. We know their name. And we ask a certain din, and we say that, and each one says the psak, and we go after rov. Why don't we say in the Sanhedrin, don't go after rov? They're kavua. They're in their seats, and therefore it should be mechsa mechsa. It should be 50%, and we should never be able to decide anything. Isn't the whole din of holchin achar rov in a circumstance of kavua? So Lexi, you're going to answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like a perfect answer that, I mean, I think it relates to what you were saying about Yadua, but I think a lot of it has to do with what is our more kind of unknown and changing factor, and what are our more fixed factors in a given case? Like, what are we taking for granted versus what is like the uncertainty that actually exists in this given scenario, right? So for example, with the Tesha Chaniyot, which I think is one of the easiest examples, right? The case where we're going to say it's usher because is like, you weren't careful enough to pay attention as to whether you were buying from the one Nevela store out of the like 9 stores that exist, right? And the whole suffix is like, those exist there. You know which is which, like, or you should be able to, and you just goofed, right? And like didn't pay enough attention. As opposed to like when you, I mean, again, as we end up seeing in the Machaber, for other reasons, you probably shouldn't eat a piece of meat that's like lying on the street. But like, if you find that, you know, it's not that like, there's kind of no judgment on what you should have known, right? Or what you should have been doing, right? It's just, you found this. And like, what are the likely circumstances, right? And so I think,
so is it a punishment? Is it kanas?
like, and I think that's like, I wouldn't state it necessarily as formally as that, but like, yes, I do think a lot of it has to do with how do we view the person's behavior and how do we view how they're acting vis-a-vis these knowns and unknowns in any of the given cases, right? And like, you know, even though it's deeply fucked up in various ways, when we talk about the case of like the girl being raped, right? I think there are also elements of how are they envisioning that scenario when she is going to a city versus when a man is coming out to her. Like that.
But remember, this din is bein lakula or bein lachumra. So it's not, it could be lakula. It's not necessarily a kanas.
Correct.
We have some cases where it's lakula.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. I'm not saying that like you could map as to, oh, every time it's mechsa, it's like lachumra every time. I'm saying that I do think it maps both onto how we understand a person's behavior and also, again, how we relate to like when you're just in a place, like, you know, the makeup of the place. You said that, right? There's this notion of like, Deah, like, yeah, I know this place is like mostly Jews, but I'm also really aware of that community over there. That's like a bunch of like non-Jews in this neighborhood. And I know that's part of the makeup of this given area. I'm aware of that when being in this place. Versus it is true that like if somebody walked out of a city that was like 90% Jewish, my assumption is that they would be a Jew.
Mm-hmm. Joel, what do you got?
I want to answer the Sanhedrin thing, and maybe that leads to the whole thing, is because before they take the vote, they don't have a set status. And so they're all, right, as they vote, they decide. So it's not actually a kavua thing at all, right? They all essentially make up their minds as they vote. And this is the whole thing, is like when you enter the city, everybody in there, or you throw a rock into the group, right? Everybody in there has a set status. Yet when somebody emerges from that group, it's now somebody emerging from a group, and therefore their status is unknown. And that's the difference, is it has to be a place where it's a fixed status versus an unfixed status. And somebody's vote is an unfixed status until they vote.
In other words, even though they're in their place, they're kind of like question marks. They're kind of unknown entities until they express themselves. Okay. But they are in their place. They are, if we think of it as makom, then they are in their place. And that's certainly the difference between, let's say, a person in the city versus him leaving the city. Whether he's in his place or not in his place, or whether she's in their place or they're in her place. Place does seem to be a factor.
Well, I mean, as opposed to, it may not work. Let's say if people have to vote, let's say per their party.
Well, let me tell you the answer. Let me tell you the answer that is given, and it's a little bit bizarre answer. And the answer is that it's true the people, but it's not. It's a bizarre answer, but it's going to give us a certain insight. It's true that the people are kavua, but we're not judging the people. We're not. It's not that the people in the Sanhedrin are being judged. We're trying to determine, is this person a voter like this or a voter like, we're determining the law, and the people are kavua, but we're not like the cows that we're trying to determine, is this a treifa cow or not? What we are judging is what they're saying, and what they're saying is words that they say, and the words are hevel pihem. It goes out of their mouth, and those words are in the air, and they're not fixed in a place. The din is based on what they say and not on who they are. And who they are is kavua, but what they say is what comes out of their mouth. It's kind of almost what you're saying, Joel. But they specifically talk about it to being the words that are coming out. Yeah.
Well, I think it may become a problem if people like had to vote per party, right? They didn't actually get a choice. Like, certain things were just based on, I vote like this because I am an X or a Y. And then I have no personal choice, then it is kavua potentially. So you could claim like, I don't know, a court or a decision-making body that votes, based on party and not based on individual choice is always
Right.
mechsa.
All right, but let's get, you got excellent. Right. It's an interesting point. What's another, but we didn't get all the cases. What is another case in the Gemara? We have two more cases. One case we mentioned is the Tesha Chanuyot, where you go into the store and you buy meat, and then you come out and you don't know, you were maybe sleepwalking, and you went into the store, and Tesha were kosher stores and one was not kosher, and you come out and you say, gee, where did I buy this meat? And you say, well, I probably bought it from one of the 9 kosher ones and not from the treifa one. But the din is that it's considered mechsa. We don't go after the rov. We don't give you the privilege of going going after the rov. Oh, by the way, I wanted to just say that, as Jessica pointed out, this is from a pasuk in Devarim, and therefore this is a din d'oraita. Just like holchin achar, holchin achar rov is din d'oraita. Is a din d'oraita. So we have 2 din d'oraitas, and we sort of don't get the privilege to apply holchin achar rov when you went into the place where it was kavua. It was not. See, the store is an interesting case because it's also in their place and it's also known. It's got both of those aspects. It's in its place and it's known. Everything in the kosher store is known to be kosher, and everything in the non-kosher store is known to be not kosher. And you just don't know where you got it from, but the place that you got it from, as you don't have the right to apply rov to such a case. But if you find it in the street in front of the store, then you can apply rov. And what's another case? Another case is in Zvachim. Joe, Yavni, you've been.
I was gonna say this all reminds me of the discussion we had of Safek, and where there was the opinion, like discussing like what you need to ask questions about. Like there's the idea that like what counts as Safek. It doesn't count as Safek just if like you don't remember, or you aren't able to determine it. It's Safek only if it's like undeterminable and more unknowable. Yeah.
The thing is like this: what about a case where a goy goes in and comes out with meat, and you were watching him, but you were far enough away that you couldn't see where he was coming from, and now he's got it in his hand? That case is called porish lifanenu, and we don't give it a din of like finding meat on the street, because even though you don't know, and you can't know because for whatever reason the goy is not reliable, and you don't know.
Right.
But we still don't give it a din of like the meat in the front of the store where you also can't know.
Right, exactly. Because
so there could be 2 cases where you don't know and you can't know, and yet the din is different.
Right, but again, I think you could argue that you can't know, but it's not so fundamentally unknowable, right? Like.
Right. Well, but let's get to the case of Zvachim, where it is kind of knowable. Because in Zvachim, what is the case in Zvachim? In Daf Ayin Gimel, it says there that you have a bunch of animals that, without getting into details, one of them, some of them cannot be brought as a korban, and some of them can be brought as a korban. The majority can be brought as korbanot, but some of them can't be brought as korbanot. So basically, the maskana there is that if they are standing in one place, then they have a din of kavua, and you can't go by rov. And even if you pulled one out, even if one, you pulled one out, you wouldn't be able to use it. Even you wouldn't be able to go by the rov, even though the majority is, let's say, allowed to be brought as korban. Then, if they were moving, however, if the animals were like, if you made a loud noise and got them moving, then you could pull one out and they would be considered not kavua. Now, in either case, these animals are unknown, right? We don't know which one is the, we just know that one of them is, at least one of them is not allowed to be brought as a korban, and the rest of them are allowed to be brought. and it's unknown which. But when they're fixed in their place, then they're called kavua. When they're in their stall. But when they're roaming the fields, then you can grab one. So that seems to say that it really hinges on location. So I think there's basically two factors. One is two different ways of, one is whether it's known or versus unknown, and one is, or it's known in its place. And actually, if you let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. Let's go to the well, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the Beit Yosef a little bit here. Okay. Okay. So we're back here. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch, to the tour. Sorry, tour in Gimel. Aaron, you want to read?
Yeah, just turning back to the tour. וכתב הרשב"א, לפיכך מצא בשר ביד גוי, אף על פי שהדבר ידוע שאין אוכלים בשר.
That's not, wait, I don't know where you are. Maybe
You said the
maybe
Torah
you're right.
Didn't you say the Torah Gimel?
Yeah, but
No,
my
that was
Torah
There
Gimel
are
Dash.
two
Sorry.
parts of
Yeah.
it.
והד אחד בטל בשרי ביבש, בדבר שאינו חשוב, דווקא כשהאיסור אינו ניכר במקומו. אז בטל
So there we have
דבר
that. There we
שאינו
have that.
חשוב.
Wait a second. There we have that expression that I said. Nikar b'mkomo. It's recognizable in its place. Basically this is. I mean, first of all, everything of bittul is only when the thing is not nikar. If the thing is nikar, then you have to take it out. The thing is, if you recognize it, you got to remove it. So here is nikar bimkomo. It's not nikar in your tarovet, maybe, but it's nikar bimkomo. Okay, Az, go ahead.
אז בטל דבר חשוב. דבר שאינו חשוב. הדבר חשוב אינו בטל. ואפילו אם פירש אחד מהם מהתערובת אסור, ולא אמריונה מרוב הפירש.
When do we not say miruba parish?
When, right, if you have a devar, you know, there's a devar chashuv in your tarovet, and you just take one out at random, you can't then eat that one.
Well, wait, piresh doesn't mean you took it out. It means it came out. Piresh means it came out of its own occurrence, and you didn't cause it. If you did it with by yadayim, that would be even more strict.
And it's one of them coming out and getting lost. It's a question of whether then you could eat it, right? As opposed to like one of them coming out, can you eat that one? One of them comes out.
Can you eat that one?
It's eliminated? No.
Can you eat that one? Because it's that's
right.
why
Here we're talking about eating the one that came out, right? And that you can't
because you might think Meruba Piresh.
You might have thought Meruba Piresh and it's mutter, but we don't say that. But it's not only about the case of a davar chashuv, it's also about davar shenikar b'mkomo, right? Whatever that is. Well, that's kavua, I believe.
אבל אם איסור ניכר במקומו, כגון 9 חנויות מוכרות בשר שחוטה, ואחד מוכרת בשר נבלה, ולקח מאחד מהם ואינו יודע מאיזה המן לקח, אסור. ואפילו בחתיכה שאינה ראויה להיכבד, דכל קבוע כמחצה מחצה דמי.
So first of all, just notice that there's a tremendous equation going on here between kavua and devar chashuv, and that's why it's in the same siman, right? It's essentially the same din. In fact, I would go so far. It is written in our sources that, in fact, a davar that is chashuv is called kavua derabanan. In other words, kavua derabanan is anything that the rabbis were gozer that is not batel. And essentially, what the rabbis did was they put it into the category of kavua, and that's why a devar chashuv. That's what. So essentially, devar chashuv, birya, and devar shebeminyan, according to the Ramah, and would be all things that are be called legitimately kavua d'Rabbanan. Just pointing out the terminology, because we're equating them. Okay, go on. Aval basar.
אבל בשר נמצא לפני החניות מותר אפילו בחתיכה ראויה להתכבד מכיוון שלא פירש בפנינו לא נולד הספק במקום קביעות וכך אנו תולים אותו ברוב. אבל אם
So
פירש
that's the key
לפנינו
line here is שלא נולד הספק במקום הקביעות. In other words, the suffix wasn't happened in its place of kaviyut. It happened after it came out, and then the suffix. Then we said, well, where is this meat from? But when it was in its place, the suffix didn't occur. As opposed to somebody who took a piece and the suffix happened when he took it out, when it went into his hands. It's essentially like there's a piece of meat in his hands, and he has a suffix now about it. He doesn't know where he got it from. So it happened in its place. It got into his hands when it was in its place. Now go on, aval. Aval im piresh lefanenu.
sorry. אבל אם פירש לפנינו הווה כאילו היא עדיין במקום הקביעות והאסור.
So that means, what does it mean, piresh lefanenu? That could either be that he did it himself or that he watched somebody do it. Then it's like it's still in its place of kviut, and therefore it's asur. Okay. Here, before we go, a second. Yeah, before we go on, look at the Beit Yosef Gimel Aleph. Aaron, go ahead.
You mean from a mashgad dikivon shelo pirish? Oh no, sorry.
V'had echad batel betray.
Right. בדבר שאינו חשוב דווקא כשאיסור אינו ניכר במקומו. בפרק גדנשה מאיתה ההי ברייתא. דאיתא בדיוכתא טובה בתלמוד.
Right, it's in many places in the Talmud.
9 חנויות כולן מוכרות בשר שחוטה ואחד מוכר בשר נבלה ולקח מאחד מהן ואינו יודע מאיזה מהן ספקו אסור. ונמצא הלך אחר הרוב וכתבו התוספות ספקו אסור דכל קבוע כמחצה מחצה דמה.
Stop. So the Tosfot and the Rosh, right? Speko asur. So it's a suffix, but it's asur. To call kavua kemeksa al meksa dami, because anything that's kavua is the meksa al meksa. Vahad, go ahead.
והדה קיימלה, דדבר יבש חד בתרי בתל, היינו היחס שמעורב ואינו ניכר האיסור. אבל כשהאיסור ניכר במקומו, לא שייך בביטול. ודבר המעורב נמי היחד החשיב, ולא בתל, אמרינן כל קבוע כמחצה מחצה דם.
Right, so the key line here is aval, kisha ha'isur nikar b'mkomo, lo shayach bebitul. In other words, you took this piece into your hand, you have no right to say it's batel because it's in its place. You know, it's almost like efshar levarer. It's in its place. You can't cause bittul to occur when a thing is in its place of kviut, of where it's known, where knowledge about what it is. It's kind of like, you know, if you're a human being can never be batel, right? Because a human being is known what he is, in a sense, when he's in his place. Okay. Anyway,
there's only bitul hayesh for a human being.
Yeah. You know the joke about.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's go back to the Shulchan Aruch. To the tour. Katav harashba.
וכתב הרשב"א, לפיכך מצא בשר ביד גוי, אף על פי שהדבר ידוע שאין לוקחים בשר אלא מאותם מקולין, ואינו mutar the harsh pirish and a lot of boas effect. Bemet very mamrim
Wait.
shalora uta yosemina makalin.
Oh,
Aval
that's what I was
uta
saying.
yosemina makalin botasha no lot hasefek venimsa shabim kom hakviut no lot hasefek ve'asur.
Right. So if you saw him, that was my. So if it's in the hand of the goy, then theoretically, at least, it would be mutter because we'd go after the rove. Because the suffix is when it's in the hand of the goy. The goy is like considered a non-verbal person, a person who can't tell us anything about what his edut is not valid. So, so therefore we can just say, well, it's there. It's like so therefore it's the suffix is when I see it in front of me and in his hands. But if I saw him, yotze min hamekolin, he went out of the shop. And I obviously don't know which shop I saw him coming out of, because if I saw him, then I would know. So then it was not. So I saw the doubt about it at a time when it was sort of in its kaviyut, when it was knowable. So then it's asur. Then it's 50-50. It's asur in the sense that it's 50-50, right? That we don't know where it's from. So we say suffix, and therefore it's suffix and it's asur. Just a second. Yeah, so go on, read the Gidal.
Ve'yireli shelo asro lo asro ela bizman shebi asma aval nit aval bachirot ve'ena nikret b'teil barov mishum suffix feka. So if you have something that is we have this situation where you don't know which store you bought it from, so it's kavua. If it's an ataro, it's suffix feka.
What's the suffix feka?
Well, one is you don't know. Maybe you're not eating that particular one, and even if you're eating that particular one, maybe it was actually not from the Nevela selling store.
Right, exactly. So when the first one you mentioned is called tarovit. It's called suffix tarovit. The suffix from the fact that it's in a tarovit, and that would of course require you to eat it separately. If you ate them,
Right.
or in a certain way, at least eat them in a certain way. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, at that point, you may just not have to eat all of it at once, right? That just be maybe that simple. So
right, in some way, you're gonna have to. You're right. You're gonna have to maintain that suffix. Exactly. You have to maintain that suffix in your eating of it. I just sorry. I want to jump.
Right. The Ramah points out that if you do hold the kavua as an isser d'oraita, then it shouldn't be suffix feka.
Why? Because the first suffix is an isser d'oraita.
Yeah.
Except that's not really makes sense, because the din of kavua is just saying that I can't go after rov, and I'm left with the suffix. It's a suffix min Torah, but it's a suffix. That's dafka why we don't say it's suffix de Rabbanan. We don't say it's suffix de Rabbanan or something. We're dafka saying it's suffix. Well, actually, let's read that word. Let's read those words very carefully. I have a little bit of a chiddush here to say, based on what you said. V'yireli lo asru. What does it mean, lo asru? Is it talking about the Torah or the rabbis?
The rabbis.
So we're already in the world of, he's not talking about every case that he just mentioned before, the tour. He's talking only about the case where it's kavua de Rabbanan. Because that's what he's talking about, kavua de Rabbanan. And which is case of kavua de Rabbanan, where this is a machloket, whether when you see the goy come out and you just don't know from which store he came, the Torah is saying that's only a din, that's not the Torah din of kavua, that's a rabbinic din of kavua. And on that rabbinic din of kavua, he's applying he's a fake.
But both the Beit Yosef and the Bach think he's talking about kavua d'oraita.
Okay, but that doesn't stop me. I stand by what I said.
This might be too
Uh,
long, but this might depend on whether or not you think sfeika on a deoraita is a deoraita rule that it's mutar, or it's a mutar because a safek deoraita is only a derabanan isur, and therefore sfeika is sfek derabanan. Because in that case, kavua, which is a asur mina Torah, a sfeika on it wouldn't really be a sfeika, that would be mutar, because it's not really a safek deoraita in the first place.
Wait, kavua is a sfek. Why is kavua safek according to the Torah? It's a Torah safek, right?
It's a din Torah, exactly. So therefore, it's not
a din Torah that it's a safek,
yes,
and therefore it doesn't mean that's usher. It just means that we treat it as a safek, however we would treat a safek, which would mean safek deraita l'chumra.
Yeah.
Logically, then, if I applied another safek to it, it would be a sfek sfeika, and it should be mutter, even though kavua is deraita. Right?
Yeah, but it depends on whether or not if it's if the reason that safek sfeika is only mutar is because a safek deoraita is only asur derabanan, right? Then this is not asur derabanan, and therefore an extra safek on it wouldn't make it mutar, as opposed to other sfekot, which would be. So.
Well, this is a big question on the Rambam, I think, who says that safek deoraita is only derabanan. Then how would you ever how would you ever have a din of kavua, which is only lowering it to the category of safek deraita, and safek deraita is a din derabanan? So then how? So then it sort of contradicts. Then how could kavua be din deraita? It have to be din derabanan because there's no such thing as safek deraita. In other words, it would be mutter. Every kavua, according to the Rambam, every kavua would be a safek deraita l'kula min Torah. So then there would be no din. Then it would be mutter, or would be like would only come out lakula. It would only come out that the din of kavua is lakula. It's a big question to ask. I forget the answer. I saw an answer for that, but that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is very.
I won't go into it, but yeah,
this is very complicated. I don't want to get into all these different things, but yeah. Right. Everyone understands that the safek deraita l'chumra is what kind of a din is that? Is that din deraita or din derabanan? It sort of makes sense to say it's din derabanan, because with the Torah, if the Torah wouldn't say about itself, whenever you have a safek about my laws, then also be machmir, then there's not a safek about the law. Then the law itself is saying do that. So it's not really a safek. All right. Anyway, let's go on to hay. Let's go on to hay because there's I want to look at the Beit Yosef on hay. So I was just saying an interesting idea. Take it or leave it, but I think it makes sense. The Yoreh shelo asru ela bizman shehu b'fnei atzmo is talking about, for example, haticha ruya litchabed. If you want to make it simple, I'll take a psuka. What is it? Halacha psuka, a simple case. Haticha ruya litchabed, which I just got through saying is derabanan kavua. What happens if I have one of those pieces comes out of my mixture with my haticha ruya litchabed, and now it falls into another mixture? And that's what he's saying. Yira li shelo asru haticha ruya litchabed in a mixture, and then one of the bezman shehu bifnei atzmo. If it comes out and it's sitting in front of you, so now it's asur. Aval nitarev b'cherot, when something from that mixture comes out and mixes with another mixture, a second mixture, they ain't only carrot, batela, barov, even though it's haticha ruya litchabed, mishum sfek sfeika. Because maybe what came out wasn't the original. It's not a suffix that it's ruya litchabed, it's for sure ruya litchabed. But maybe what came out was not one of the usher ones in the tarot. It was one of the mutter ones. And even if it was one of the usher ones, now I'm eating in the tarot, but maybe in this tarot, it's not there.
Rav Nachum, it seems like all of the Nosei Kalim think he is talking about kavua d'oraita.
After class, I'll find you a source for what I'm saying. I'm not making it up, but I can't say right now where I saw it. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, it makes a lot of sense, and that's That's I like to, I may be not so, how to say, I'm traditional in my outlook on halacha, but but on these little tiny things, I like to be untraditional. Okay, go on to hay, please.
Do you want me to keep reading or come on?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
לפיכך, מי שלקח בשר מן המקולין, אפילו חתיכה ראויה להתכבד, ואחר כך נמצאת טרפה במקולין, ולא נודעו חתיכות הטרפה בין שאר החתיכות, והוא אינו יודע מאיזה הם לקח, כל מה שלקחו מן המקולין קודם שנמצאת הטרפה מותר, שלא נפל בין הספק בקבוע אלא לאחר שפירש. So if you buy some sort of meat and then you find out that one of the you don't remember where you bought it, they were all kosher, but then it turned out one of them.
Wait, it says afilu haticha ruya l'tchabed.
Right.
Even if it was
you were buying nice meat. That's really l'tchabed.
Right.
You don't remember what store you bought it from, and after you bought it,
by the way, this is just another point that the pieces. He's talking about two possibilities. Either you took a piece that was big enough to be ruya l'tchabed, or it was smaller than that, but it was still a piece that is a piece. Okay. Then they discovered that some of the meat in the store had been treif.
And you don't know where you bought it from.
And then no one knows. And no one knows in the store what is treif and what's not treif. You got this store, basically, the butcher was cutting up a cow, and then he cut up another cow, and then he cut up another cow. He got a pile of, pieces of meat in the refrigerator. And somebody comes in and says, one of the cows that I gave you actually was treif. One of the lungs we just checked was treif. And nobody knows. Nobody in the world knows what these pieces are.
You don't even know that you bought it from that store in this particular case.
He doesn't know which store he bought from, right? He doesn't even know if he bought from the store that had the treifa or not. So it's kind of like there's a suffix in the store, and then there's another suffix. Did he buy from that suffix store, from that doubtful store? Go ahead. Kol masha lakach me'amekolin kodem shenimsa treifa muta. So anything that he bought before it was discovered that the lung was was problematic, even though it was maybe from the problematic animal. Why? Right, but he can't go back and buy anything more from that store. From the right.
במדברים אמרים, בחתיכה ראויה להתכבד שאין לה ביטול, אבל שאר חתיכות מותרות. וראוי להחמיר לאסור כל החתיכות שנשארו במקולין, שאין הכל בקיאים בדברים אלו. ואם אתה מתיר בשאינן חשובות, קרוב הדבר לטעות ולקח אף מן החשובות. וכי אנו נוהגים עד כאן.
So here is a gezerah d'Rabbanan that we don't want people to really. They could go back if it's not. When could they go back? If it's not ru'ui l'tchabed, right?
Even after we discover there are treifot at one of these stores, you could go back to that store and buy meat scraps, because those would have been batel, right? Sorry, the treifot would have been batel vis-a-vis the rov of ksherah, right? And since these little scraps that you're getting are definitionally in those cases, he's saying it would be.
I wouldn't say nobody buys scraps. Scraps are thrown away.
No, I'm saying scraps is the wrong word. Like not a big steak, something not really big. Either it is the isser and it's been batel, or it's not the isser and it's kosher, right? And so theoretically, it should be fine to get those, but they're saying you shouldn't buy it because we're worried people will then end up actually buying steaks from there.
We'll buy steaks. And what's the problem with buying steaks?
Ein lahem bitul.
Right, because
Ein
if
lahem bittul.
the steak is the treifa, then it's not
So
batel.
why is this a din of kavua at all? What's kavua here?
I mean, it's also maybe it's just like a public policy decision as well, right? We don't want people going to a store that is mixing up trade.
Right. Well, that's for sure.
That
For
aspect-
sure.
Right, I mean, that's
But
like
I'm
one of
saying, why
the
is it
reasons
prohibited
behind
to
it,
buy the
but
big pieces?
it's not, that part's not about kavua anymore. Like this section about how really Me'ikar Hadin, you should be able to buy the non-big pieces is just about bitul, right? That's why, like, why saying
Yeah, the
Me'ikar
small
Hadin-
pieces, I'm asking, why are the small pieces batel and not the big pieces also batel?
because chatichar relates kabed.
So it's din de Rabbanan.
The tour goes on to say that he doesn't think the small pieces are batel.
Right, the Torah gets into that. The Beit Yosef says as far as being stupid, like it does seem like the small pieces should be batel because again, if we know, right, if we don't know what's the treifa, but we know the treifa definitely constitutes less than a rove, right, then the small pieces should be batel. Because again, if they are the treifa, they've been batel vis-a-vis the things around them. And if they're not the treifa, then they're not the treifa, right? But we're no longer, this section isn't talking about kavua. This section is talking about bitul. And then like public policy.
But I think the tour goes on to say that he does think that the question of the smaller pieces is about kavua.
Yes,
Right,
it
just doesn't
starts, the tour starts with
make sense in the
fichach,
understanding of the Rashba.
the fichach mashalakach. Anyway, look, let's look at the Beit Yosef. I wanted to get to this Beit Yosef here. First of all, there's a Beit Yosef Gimel Bet, which we'll skip, but he says there that the Rambam already wrote that the rabbis have forbid any meat found in the shuk, even if all the stores in the town would be kosher stores, because we have a din that basar what is it, nitalem me'ayin, that if a Jew is not supervising it, it becomes questionable and therefore not allowed. So the whole din is always going to be usher in any case. But look at hay in the here. Maybe Alice, you want to read hay in the Beit Yosef?
Yeah, just tell me where it is. So it's hay in Beit Yosef because I'm on.
Masha katav lefichach misha lakach basar min hamakolin afilu chaticha ru'il titchabed.
Okay, I'm there. Okay. ומה שכתב, ולפיכך מי שלקח בשר מן המקולין, אפילו חתיכה ראויה להתכבד וכולי, בתולד הבית הארוך נתבאר יפה טעמו, שכתב וזה לשונו. ובנמצא הלך אחר הרוב, ואם תאמר אפילו פירש, אמה ישרי עלי, והאיכה למגזר, שמה ייקח מן הקבוע. וחידתנן בפרק התערובות,
Wait, go back and explain.
Okay, I'll go back. Okay, so and what is written in the we read it. So I took the meat from the shop. Okay, so in Torah Habayit Ha'aroch, it's well explained, and the reason is following, and this is this language. So because it follows the majority.
If you've been nimsa, if you found it outside, you go by the rov.
Right, and the rov of the Chaniyot was okay. Okay, the imtomar afilu peresh. So, but if you say that even if it's perush min harov, it should be allowed. So there's a reason for us to.
No, he's saying, why do we allow you to have it if you found it on the street, even if it's piresh amai shariale? Why would we permit you to eat it? Because you should make a gezerah that you might come and take from the kavua. In other words, why didn't the rabbis forbid every single case of finding it outside because maybe you'll come to take it. You'll go into the shop and take it and say, well, it's the same as if I found it outside.
Okay. Okay, so now the explanation will follow, right? I haven't read it. Right? וחידתנן בפרק התערובות, כל הזבחים שנתערבו בחטאות המתות, או בשר, או בשור הנזכר, אפילו הן רובו ימותו כולם. So in Zvachim, it's written that it's mixed the regular oxes with the shor haniskal. So even if the oxes which are
Even if there's 10,000,
right, like ready to
they'll
be
all die. You have to kill them all.
sacrificed, so all of them will be killed, right? Because there's this shor haniskal. The akshinan alei bigmara v'nechshavin hu ki heichi denayade. Okay, so what was the phrase? So let's.
That was what we said before. Scare them, make them move around, and then they can become batel.
Venema kol leperesh meruba peresh. And let's say that if the one of them, which like if it separates from the majority, so it separates from the majority, and it should be allowed. Umeshane shema yikach min hakavua. And the answer is then somebody could take from the kavua.
Somebody might take from the kavua, and therefore we don't let you mix them up, right? Because maybe somebody will take one without mixing them up. And therefore we're not going to let you mix them up. That's the answer. So let's see what Re says.
So there, the Re says that there is like Isur v'Heter are mixed together. Ve'ish harit le ksheperesh atei lemishkal min hakavua. So, but and if we permit it when it's separated, and we say that it's separated from the rov, so we in the end we will take from the kavua.
Right, because it's a mixture. Kevan de'ein mekomo nikar, because its place is not known. I'll just read a little bit, and there's another part I'll have you read. Aval hecha demakom ha'isser noda. But when the Isser is known in its place, the Nikar, lo chayshinan. But if it's clearly Usser, in other words, it's in a store of Treifa, we're not worried. Dibereshai lo askinan. We're not dealing with Rasha people. We're dealing with good people. Shema yikach min ha'isser. We're not worried that he's going to take from the Isser. But if it's a mixture, he'll say, well, anyway, let's go by Rove. So he'll take one out, not knowing that Rove doesn't apply here because it's Kavua. Because he'll say, well, most of them are kosher, so I'll take one out. But when it's, so Dafka, so ironically, you get a Kula when it's 100% Usser, because everybody will know that that's Usser and only will take it when it comes out. But when there is a mixture of cows, then we make a Gezerah, because people will think it's Rov, even though it's really Kavua. It's really Kavua because they're not moving. Well, according to this, according to the Re, if a person took from a makolin, haticha rui l'tchabed, dafka haticha rui l'tchabed, v'achar kach nimsa treifa b'makolin, af al pi shelo noda ad shepirsha, even though it wasn't known that it was a treifa until after he already took one out. So, kishenolad ha-riuta b'mekolin lo haita zo b'kavua. When the suffix occurred, it had already left its kavua place. Afilu hachi asura gezerah shema yikach min kavua. So then we're going to say it's asur because maybe you'll take from the kavua. So that's this gezerah d'Rabbanan that you might take from the kavua. In other words, after the suffix is after the trephus is known. So therefore, it should be that even if you took it before, it should be asur. Hoil v'lo noda t'ticha trefa bein atichot heter V'ken Rabbeinu Shimshon. Wait a second. Anyway, so here he's just sort of explaining how this din is actually based on the case of the cows. I think that's why I got out of it. That that the cows are mixed up, and we essentially made a gezerah. That's a sort of a gezerah on these cows that you can't take it even though when they're mixed. And the makullah is also kind of mixed because there's treifa pieces and not treifa pieces. So the same way that you can't take one out from those cows, you can't take one out from this makullah. There's another place there's an important Ran that I want to look at. Just let's skip a little bit ahead in the Beit Yosef. And it says, B'ken katav haran. It's towards the end of this section, before it says, V'yesh l'tmoa al Rabbeinu. If you see that, it says, B'ken katav haran, pergida nashe, b'shem atosfot, Delo mikri kavua ela kishe haya ha'isr noda kodem shelakach. You see that?
I don't see it. Wait.
In other words, I'm sort of
fine.
showing you. I
Just
want to
take it.
sort of show a difference between Tosfot and Tosfos that's brought in the Beit Yosef and Gimel mentions that the Isser that is Nikar b'Mkomo, and therefore it's called Kavua. And there's a Ran that gives a slightly different explanation, even though he says it in the name of Tosfot. He says, "V'ken katav haran b'perikid nashe b'shem hatosfot lo mikri kavua ela kishe haya ha'isser noda kodem shelakach aval im lo noda ha'isser b'sha shelakach af al pi shela'achar shelakach nitgaleh ha'isser v'na'aseh kavua lo amrinan v'na'aseh kavua l'mafreya." In other words, he's saying that kavua has to be known at the time that you're taking it and not afterward. V'nafka mina l'misha lakach basar me'amakolin v'achar kach noda shahayta treifa b'neihem. His shari, and that's why it's shari, because at the time you took, it wasn't. In other words, it's not enough that it's in its place. I think that's kind of the point that Ron is addressing. That what does it matter whether I know? It just matters whether it is in its place, and it's an isser in its place. So the Ran is saying, no, it also has to be known that it's an isser. Shedin kavua deshari shedin kavua shiye kemeksa al mekse chidushu ve'en lecha bo ela mishas chidusho ve'ela. In other words, this din is a special chidush of the Torah, and therefore it only applies when the knowledge of the thing being treif occurs and not before.
I mean,
so that's basically the basis.
That's what we were saying earlier, right? When we were saying earlier about the concept of kavua, and we talked about it being deeply linked to our notion of like, how much do we know and how we're relating to both fixedness and knowledge, and how fixedness is often connected
Right.
to. And we're saying those two aren't inherently, we don't say because something is fixed, it inherently means you know about the status, right? And so like, that's why we're saying that it's like the fact that it is kavua, that it is in one place, is not relevant until there is also knowledge of a particular composition.
Perfect, yes. But I'm just sort of bringing in that there's kind of different emphasis in the Tosfos, because if you just look at the Tosfos, he just says, bimkomo. Nikar, well, unless you want to say the word nikar implies nikar, that it's known that it's usr and it's in mikomo. So
I think that's how nikar is used, right? That you recognize the thing that is usr in its place,
no, you
right?
could, right? You could say
like
it's
with the nevela, like kanut.
Okay, great. So then the Ran is just spelling it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting that there are I think there are three possible positions here, because you could go as lenient as the Ran, And then you could go as machmir, as I think the Ra'ah, who says, not only do you not know if you took a treifa, you're not even sure you bought it from that store, and still that would be kavua and aser. So you could even, right there are two variables of, you find out the store was selling treifa retroactively, and also the question of whether you know, you might say, even if you don't know that you bought from that store, the mere fact that at the time that you were buying from a store you didn't remember where it was, there was a treifa, that is also kavua.
Wait, I don't follow you. The mere fact that there was a treifa, but you
Like
didn't know there was a treifa?
Like there are two different scenarios. One, right, you find out there is a treifa. One scenario is, I know that I bought from the store where the treifa was found. There, the Mako position is the Ran, who says it's fine, and the Rashba, and Rabbeinu Shimshon says that's kavua. But you could also say, I found out there was a treifa in the store, and I'm not even sure I bought from that store. In which case, the Machmir position would be, even though you don't even know that you bought from the store where a treifa was found after you bought the meat, that still counts as kavua, which I think the Ra'ah says still that would be aser.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, let's look at the Shulchan Aruch. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe Raphael, you can read in the Shulchan Aruch Gimel.
You mean, I'm not sure if you have the same division as I do.
Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, I have the same division as you.
Gimel, just a second. Gimel, yes, here. תשע חנויות מוכרות בשר שחוטה, ואחת מוכר בשר נבלה, קח מאחת מהן, ואין ידוע מאיזה מהן לקח, הרי זה אסור, שכל קבוע כמחצה מחצה דמי, אבל בבשר הנמצא בשוק, או ביד עובדי כוכבים, מותר. כיוון שרוב החנויות מוכרות שם בשר שחוטה. לכל הפרש מרוב הפרש, וזהו דין תורה, החכמים אסרו. אף על פי שכל...
That's what we saw in the Rambam. We saw the Rambam.
אף על פי שכל השוחטים וכל המוכרים ישראל. Because ניתנים מן העין.
Right.
Should I translate or just continue to Rama?
No, that you can just continue.
Yeah. הגו. אייל אל סימן סמך גימל, עד אמרינן כל פרש מרוב פרש, היינו שלא פרש לפנינו, אבל פרש לפנינו, שרואהו, שעובד כוכבים לקחו, אבל כאילו לקחו משם בידוי.
Yeah. So in other words, if you see a goy take it, it's the same as if you
took it on your own.
Took it on your own. So that's exactly like what we saw in the tour, actually, really. Look, wait a second. Look at Tet Zion in the Shach.
Shach and Tet Zion, just a second. Shach, open. Yes. The Shach, אבל בוסר?
אבל בשר הנמצא בשוק, right?
אבל בשר הנמצא בשוק, אפילו הוא חתיכה ראויה להתכבד בה, כך פשוט בפויסקים.
Right. So in other words, it could also be a חתיכה ראויה להתכבד. Okay.
To Yudzayin? To continue to Yudzayin?
Wait a second. Yeah, I'll skip Yudzayin. Wait a second. I was thinking of doing Yudzayin. Yeah, so look at Kaf. Look at Kaf in the Taz. In the Shach.
אבל חכמים מסרו, משום בוסר שניסה לי מן העין, כדאי סימן סמך גימל, וכבר נתבאר שם על נכון, באיזה עניין מתירים שם בשר שניטלים מן העין, וכאגב נמותר.
So that's just so you see that source, that it's what it is. Okay, so to go to Dalet.
To what?
Rov Chanuyot.
Rov Chanuyot, just a second. Yes. רוב חנויות מוכרות בשר שחוטה ומוכרות בשר נביא. לא לקח מאחד מהן, אינו יודע מאיזה
Wait,
לקח.
read it a little bit slower. Read it a little bit slower.
Pardon. רוב חנויות מוכרות בשר שחוטה ומיעוט מוכרות בשר נבלה. לקח אחד מהם ואינו יודע איזה מהן לקח. מתערבה באחרות ואינה ניכרת, פתילה ברוב משום ספק ספיקה. ויש אוסרים וכאי גבלה
Wait.
משום...
So wait, look at so wait, I have a question. Ve'eno yodea me'eze mehen lakach. So now it should be also from the Torah, right?
Mhm.
If it gets mixed up, Avenita rev ba'achirot ve'eno nikeret betela berov. Mishum Sfeik Sfeika. My question is, why does it say Mishum Sfeik Sfeika? Shouldn't it just say Mishum Bittul Barov? In other words, what's the case? He took Basar Shchuta, there's a Miyut Mochrot Basar Nevela, and he Lakach Mechat Mehen, Ve'eno Yodea Me'ezen. So worst case is he's got a piece of Treifa. And now it's Nitarev Ba'cherot, and it's not nikert, and I don't know which one is the one that got mixed up. It should be batel barov, just like a normal din. Why is it any stricter than a normal din? If you have treif meat and you mix it up with kosher meat, it's batel barov. Why does he say batel barov mishum sfeik sfeika? Just let him say batel barov.
The pshat lichoiro is that the Bet Yosef here is addressing the din derabonon that kol kavua kemechtzad mechtzadam, meaning because we have here the schumer of kavua, it can't be batel berov as a normal suffix. Even when we matir it, you need a stronger type of heter.
No, but it can't be worse. All that kavua means is that it's got a din of mechza mechza. So from the Torah, it's considered 50. Possibly kosher and possibly not kosher. So how can you say that has a stricter din than a thing that's for sure not kosher, which would be batel barov? You can't say that it can.
חתיכה רעועה להתכבד, it's not batel barov.
Oh, so if you look at Shach 22, I don't really have time to look at it, but in Shach 22, he explains it, yes, that you must say we are speaking of a large piece. In other words, that wouldn't normally be batel barov. But if it would be a small piece,
if it's a
then
small,
einach-
you
Doesn't
don't need
love
to
anyway.
say like because of suffix fika, it's just batel barov, even if it's
exactly,
yeah.
small piece, it should be just batel barov.
Right, and there also the Shach Kuf Gimel does say in the batel barov like tzarich iyun delo yehe ela tarovot.
No, he says, so look at Gimel, yeah.
Like pointing
So
out the
read-
idea that tarovot and spekot are not the same thing, and that when we're dealing with tarovot, the machaber and
Wait,
others.
let me go slower. Let me go slower a little bit. In Kaf Gimel, tzarich iyun delo yehe ela tarovot. In other words, what he means is he doesn't. What he's asking there is, who says that there is sfeik sfeika? This should just be a single suffix of tarovot.
Well, I think the single suffix is whether you got from the treif store, right? That's the suffix. But then he's saying the tarovot doesn't count as a suffix, right? He's saying we deal with tarovot. That's not considered a speika in the same way. When we're dealing with just tarovot, we have this
That's
notion
a big
that comes
question,
up,
right?
which is pointing out hamacharas berle that like delo shari ella bish shlosha tarovot. When we're talking about tarovot as the permissible element, it should require, if that's what we're going off of here, it should require more, and that just a tarovot by itself is not treated like a stam suffix.
Right, but if we go on, he says the spherule deshari b'shtei tarovo kidol kaman sifkatin nun v'tzarich lomar the spherule lemachaber the kevan the kavua chidushu Gara mi taravot. It's worse than, in other words, it's worse than tarovot. For kol shenit arev achar kach azlinan batarov v'shari. It should be mutter afterwards. In other words, it's not normally tarovot is not considered good enough to be called a safek, but here it is because it's less of a chumra dika din.
Right, but I think
that's
he's
what he
almost saying the Shach is almost articulated just in a way that isn't even about like suffix so much as like how would this work just like stam? Well, it's the idea of really the kavua and the idea of mechza nefza is what is even making us like more worried
Well,
about this.
look at kaf dal. Look at kaf dal. Wait, look at kaf dal. Mishum sfeik sfeike. Safek b'shash ochel chaticha shemesh lo zohi. So first of all, when I'm eating any particular haticha, maybe it's not the one that was that came out. That was usher because of that was porish. Sheba meha kavua. Ve'im tomar zohi shem. And if you say it is the one that came from the kavua, shemesh shel heteri. Kavua only gave me a din of safek, and so maybe this is the heter one. So I have two suffix. When I'm eating one, with a fizeh, asur le'echol kulam b'bat achad, and therefore I can't eat them all together. Delecha ela chadas feika upashutu. So he's saying the one suffix is that I'm eating it in its harovet, and therefore I don't even know if this is the one that was from the kavua. And then he says the second suffix is that if it was a kavua, if it was from the kavua, that only gives me a din of suffix. It doesn't give me a din of vada yisra.
And this gets at what we saw previously with the batal barov siman, right? Is the language of betela barov mishum suffix beka, right? This is part of what the Rosh pointed out with what he disliked about everybody else in the batal barov. Was he was like, what do you mean you have to eat it one by one, or not one person can eat all of it? Like we said, it's batal. That means it's permitted, right? That like tarova, it's not about suffix. It's about like canceling and saying this is all.
That's only when you're using a din of rov. But we don't apply a din of rov. That's the point. Because it's a wait a second. Because it's a haticha
the
we don't apply
does not imply suffix. The language of betela has generally been used to say rendering permitted, not now that it's in a mixture, I could eat one of these and not know which piece it is. Right?
I mean, there's
he really should have said mutter barov mishum sfeik sfeika.
Yes.
But yeah, I agree with you that the language is a little bit out of place, but and it's because it's mutter, it's not really bittul, it's sfeik sfeika. Well, sfeik sfeika is a way of generating bittul, kind of. I mean, no? Sfeik sfeika is not bittul. Sfeik sfeika is just a heter to eat it. You're right. It's not really bittul. You're right. It's just a heter to eat it, but it's not because of bittul. So you're right. The language is a little bit problematic. You're right.
I think it's also clear that the suffix you have of something being batal barov or batal in any sort of tarovet is obviously not the same sort of what we usually mean when we say suffix, because one of the suffix is the thing there to begin with, and the other is, am I eating it in this particular moment? So we say that something is that when we say that a tarovet is counting as part of suffix feka, we're really fudging the question of what a suffix is.
Well, we're changing I would say we're fudging the definition of a tarovet, because normally we think the tarovet is permitted, and then you can eat the whole tarovet. But here we're saying the tarovet is going to generate a heter because of the way you eat it. If you eat it one by one, then you're allowed to eat it, because each one you can say is a suffix. But that, again, I'm just pointing out that the only way you can say that this is requires a suffix feka is because it's a chaticha ru'ya l'tchabed, right? I mean, I think that should be agreed. Because otherwise, simple rov would be enough. Even if it's kavua. Okay, obviously there's a lot of stuff I didn't get to. I have a lot of shachs and tazes that I skipped. But that's what we'll do. Next week, we're going to go straight to Pei Zayin, which is a new topic, Basar B'chalav. And we'll, talk about the source of that is, I think we'll spend either 2 or 3 weeks on it, actually, on that Siman, because it's sort of foundational for the rest of what we're going to learn. This, I feel guilty a little bit that I skipped one Siman here, and I also didn't get into all the details here. The truth is, these are very complicated laws and not so likely to occur. And if they do occur, you probably shouldn't be prosecuting them, and you should be asking somebody who's more experienced in these topics, because, you know, you're not going to matir a makolet, I don't think. But there, it's still Torah, and it's good to know it and understand it, and it's a fascinating din, this kavua. This whole kavua topic is a fascinating din. It appears many places in Shas, as we discussed, and I think it's worth understanding that it's another category, as it's another sort of paradigm. There's the paradigm of bittul barov, and then there's this other paradigm of kavua, and then there's the third paradigm of kol parish miruba parish, and there's all these different categories, these different sort of rules, but they don't necessarily work together. Bittul, like we're discussing, is a totally different thing than, you know, bittul is saying go by the rov, and kavua is saying don't go by the rov, and that's, you know, it becomes interesting when to apply that, and when the rabbis have added to that din. Okay, so what does it say? Idach zil gemur. The rest you can learn on your own, but we'll go to Pei Zayin next week. I look forward to that. Okay, Shavua Tov.
Shkach.
Right.